I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday we are going to talk about this guy right here. And this is the Kestrel 4600 Applied Ballistics model. This guy is pretty much a full-fledged ballistics computer. For those of you guys that don't know all the cool stuff it can do, it is not only a wind meter, but you can input your gun data and your muzzle velocity in here. It will read the environmental conditions and it will give you a computation to dial onto your scope to get your round on target. They are incredibly accurate, but as the old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. You have to input the correct parameters into this in order to get the correct ballistic solution out. And it requires you doing a little bit of homework on your part, but then there are a couple of things you have to do to set up your information in the Kestrel. And that's what we're going to go over here. Now, the first thing that you really need is you have to take your gun out and you have to shoot your gun over an accurate chronograph and get the muzzle velocity for your rifle. We get questions all the time about guys asking us, well, what should this ammo shoot through this length barrel and etc. And for that, you can get a ballpark figure, but it's not going to be accurate enough to get you first round hits with a Kestrel. You need to be dead on with that muzzle velocity. Now, you can do what's called truing, and that is get close and then shoot a variety of distances, and then the Kestrel will let you back into your correct muzzle velocity, but that's a little bit outside the scope of this video right here, and we may go into that a little bit later on in an actual range video if you guys really want to know how to do that. But what I want to do here today is just show you when you bust this guy out of the box how to get your gun information into it so you can start getting ballistic solutions at the range. Now this little thing in front of me, this is just a tabletop camera tripod with a little device that will allow me to hook this in here so I can hold it steady and I can show you guys what's going on. Now, the first information that you're going to need to get beyond your muzzle velocity is you're going to need to get some data on the bullet that you're shooting, your ballistic coefficient, the length of the bullet, the weight of the bullet, etc. And one of the best sources I've found for that is this right here. This is Applied Ballistics for Long Range Shooting by Brian Litz, and inside of it, it has a large library of real-world tested ballistic calculations for each one of the bullets, or ballistic coefficients, I'm sorry, for a wide variety of bullets that we shoot in precision rifle matches. Chances are, if it's a high BC bullet that is popular in precision rifle competition today, it will be in this book. This is the first version. I believe he has a new version of this book out now, and we'll leave a link down below on where you can find this book. We're not sponsored by Applied Ballistics. We don't get any money from them. They're not even an advertiser. This is just a great resource, and Brian Litz has gone to a lot of trouble to do all the calculations to get you the hard numbers that you need for accurate ballistic calculations. Brian is currently the chief ballistician at Berger, so he tends to favor Berger bullets in a lot of the stuff that he does now, but this is not just Berger bullets. It has Sierra, Hornady, Nullsler, Berger, a whole bunch of different varieties in this book, and it's got just a bunch of really good information to read if you want to nerd out on ballistics. So great book. I highly recommend this book. Now let's get into actually how to dial this stuff in to our ballistic calculator here. So the first thing that we're going to do is power our unit on, and it will go through its startup screen. You see 4.92 is the firmware, and it gives you a battery status. And now we are on our main screen, and obviously I already have some gun data in here. When we scroll down here, it's already set up for the 6.5 Creedmoor Ma 10. We don't care about that right now. We want to put a new gun in here. So we're going to hit the power button, which will take us back to the menu, and we're going to scroll down the main menu to gun selection. And that's going to automatically have us at new gun, and we're going to hit the center button, which is the enter button. And now this automatically has us set up for a 308 shooting a 175 grain match king at 2600 foot per second. So that may or may not help you out. If you're shooting something like a federal gold medal match, that is going to be pretty close, but that is not exactly what we want. Now, if you do shoot that round, what you can do is you can come through here and you can set it to whatever your actual muzzle velocity is just by pushing the left and right buttons here. And I'd say a good choice would be 2550. So let's say we've got a gun that we know is shooting 2550. Holding the button will scroll quickly, and just tapping it slightly will advance it. So now we're set to 2250. Well, we don't really want to use the G1. I'd much rather use a G7 BC for 175 grain match king. So we're going to push to the right and see that automatically advanced it to the G7, and that is the correct G7. 0.243 is the correct G7 ballistic coefficient for the 175 grain match king. And that's already loaded into the Applied Ballistics Kestrel. We don't have to do anything extra with that. So we're going to scroll down on pass. We know it's 175 grains. It's a 308 diameter bullet, and the length of the bullet is 1.240. Our zero, now we are going to change this because for some reason this one keeps defaulting to 109 yards. I believe it's because it automatically thinks we're working in metric, but I have the units set to English. So we're going to dial it to 100 yards. That's where we're going to zero it. And this is bore height. We really want to make sure that we dial in what our height over bore is. So this says 2.75 inches. A lot of the guns that I shoot are a little bit more than that. It's fairly simple to take a tape measure and to measure the height of your scope over the bore to get that dialed in. So go ahead and input what your actual data is. Zero height, we're going to leave that at 0 because we don't have any offset on our zero. We're zeroing for point of aim, point of impact. Zero offset, that's to the left or right, and we're going to leave that 0. And then we're going to go with rate of twist. Rate of twist is automatically set in at 11.25. So if you're shooting something running around that rate of twist, then go ahead and leave that in there. If not, we're going to say we are going with 1 in 10, which is pretty standard for a match 308. So we just click that down to 1 in 10. Now we are right-handed twist. Most of your barrels are going to be right-handed twist, so leave that alone unless you know you have a left-hand twist barrel. Elevation units, we want to go ahead and read out in mil for this gun. Clicks, we don't care about clicks because if you're running a standard mil scope, then each of your clicks is going to be 1/10 mil, so you don't have to think about that. Now, if, for instance, you're running something like a 1/4 minute angle click scope, then it could be beneficial for you to dial in what your clicks are. We could go in here and set up what the click units is if we had it set for MOA. And then that will read out not just what your MOA is, but how many clicks. I try to think in mils or MOA, and I try to forget about clicks because it can be very confusing when you start talking to a spotter or start talking to a shooter. So you want to tell them come up, 3/10 of a mil, come up 4/10 of a mil. You don't want to say, come up 3 clicks, come up 4 clicks. That can be confusing depending upon what they're calibrated for. Wind units, same deal. We're going to leave those set on mil and leave the clicks alone. Calibrate muzzle velocity, we're going to skip that. If we wanted to go in there, we could click in there, and that's where we can go in and we can start telling it what our deviation was at a certain distance. So we're going to leave that alone, and we're going to pretty much leave all the rest of this stuff alone. So we've got all that dialed in. Now we're just going to exit out of this. And now it says user gun 1, and we're back at our ballistics screen, and that will start giving us accurate. So for 500 yards with the current environmentals that it's picking up, it would say we need 3.33 mils of elevation, and for a 5 mile an hour wind we're going to need 0.45. I've got this Kestrel already set up to read 5-mile-an-hour and 10-mile-an-hour winds. I find that's really very useful for me. Instead of having to hold the Kestrel up and get a wind reading every single time, I'll usually take a wind reading when I need it, and then the rest of the time I'm just looking at the display and then I'm calculating in my brain what kind of wind hold I need. So that's the reason the screen's set up like that. When you initially get your Kestrel and you set it up, you can go in to the wind and you can tell it right here. I've got it set for 3 o'clock, 5-mile-an-hour, and 10-mile-an-hour, but you can set these to whatever you want. If you have the compass calibrated in it, then you can stick the Kestrel into the wind. You can tell it to capture the wind value, and it will capture the wind value and compute a value for you exactly. Because wind is a really dynamic variable, I don't like to do that. I like to make sure that I can figure it out on the fly while I'm on the gun, not while I'm playing with the Kestrel. So that's quick and dirty and how to set that up if you were shooting a 308, shooting 175 grain Match King at 2550. Now let's say you're shooting something totally separate that is not gonna, the Kestrel's not gonna default to that. So we're gonna go back into this gun, and once you're on the ballistics screen, if you want to go in and you want to tweak the gun, all you have to do is come down here, just scroll down until you get to gun, click it, and now you can go in here and you can change all the parameters. So let's say we're shooting something like our 6.5 Ma 10. That we're running, let's say for this instance that we're running a 3,100 foot per second muzzle velocity. So we're going to bring this back up to 3,100 foot per second. And I can't remember what we actually clocked it with the Copper Creek ammo offhand. I could go back in here and look, but it's not really necessary for what we're doing right now. So we've got our muzzle velocity put in, and we're going to use a G7, but obviously 0.243 is not the correct G7 for the 140 grain 6.5 AMAX. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to bust open our Applied Ballistics here, and I have my card handily marking the spot here. And when we look down through this, the first thing we're going to need to know is the G7 drag curve. So we can look through here and we can see that we're running about a 0.307 at 3,000 foot per second. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to dial this guy up to 0.307. Now if you actually have the Bluetooth model and you have the Applied Ballistics profile loader on a Windows compatible computer, it's very easy to connect this by Bluetooth and punch that stuff into the software, and it's really self-explanatory, and the software comes with the LITS G7 library in it, so you can just select the bullet you need and it will load it over very quickly. But if you don't have that, or you're doing it in the field, which I very often do, this is how you're going to need to go about it. Now obviously for grains, we're going to bump back down here to 140 grains. Then we're going to come down to bullet diameter, and we're shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor, and the bullet diameter for that is 0.264. So we're going to scroll down to 0.264, which is also correct, of course, if you're shooting the same bullet in the 260 Remington. And bullet length. Now, again, we can come into our book here, and it shows us what the bullet length is, and that's 1.375. So we're going to go ahead and increase this to, we're going to have to turn auto calc off, 1.3 1.375, and hit our back button here. Now what I did there is it wasn't allowing me to go in and select that because it was still trying to auto calculate the bullet length, and obviously we could see that was off. So I want to go ahead and input that manually so I know the correct data is in there. I have not researched on exactly how it comes to that auto calculation, but I prefer not to use it if I have the hard numbers on how long that bullet should be. I will go ahead and put that in myself. Same thing before we come down here to yardage and 100 yards 0. We're going to still say we're at 0.275, which really we're at a little bit more with the Ma 10. 0 height at 0, 0 offset at 0. And we are actually using a 1 in 8 twist, so we got to make sure we come back down here and set this to 1 in 8. Unfortunately, with these controls, because they're really fast speeding through there, it is easy for us to overshoot the number, and you have to drop it back. You'll get the hang of it after you use it for a little while on bumping it right where you need it. We've got right hand twist barrel, and again, mils and mils, and we are good to go. Now if we pop back here, now it's telling us for the 6.5 Ma 10, for our 500 yards, we're going to dial on 1.82, obviously significantly less than with that 308, and we're doing 0.25 mils for a 5-mile-an-hour wind, or 0.58 mils for a 10-mile-an-hour wind. And that's really all there is to it. That will have me set up. Now when I actually get to the range and start getting set up, I'll come down here to environment, click environment. I'll tell it update yes, and click back out. And then I'll go ahead and take the Kestrel and I'll spin it around in the air to get a good sampling, good air temperature. We don't want to pick up any heat off the ground or heat off your pack or anything else. So I really want it to get a good sampling of the air. And then once we're done with that, I'll come back down here and I'll tell it update no, and back out. So now those environmentals that I sampled are locked in. Now if you're shooting through a whole day, maybe around lunch, go ahead and update it again, or maybe if it's a really cold morning and you feel it warm up significantly as the morning goes on, then go ahead and update your environmentals again. But the reason that we update and then we turn it off is so that if we set it down on our pack, if we set it down in the sun and the sun starts cooking it, it's not going to start changing our ballistics. I think that is probably one of the reasons people complain about the Kestrels and various other ballistic computers, is because they are dumb devices to the extent that they don't know where they are at. They don't know if they're laying down on the ground, they don't know if they're laying down on the hood of a car or a dashboard, or if they're hanging out in free air getting a good whiff of what the environmentals are actually doing. So you have to know that, and believe it or not, that is actually something that I didn't realize until I talked to Nick Vitalbo, and he went through some of that stuff and explained to me, especially with the spinning it around in the air. So I'm constantly learning stuff about these. But with those tips, I've learned that the Kestrel is an extremely, extremely accurate ballistic computer. It's one of my favorite electronic devices to take to the field, and it really increases that first round hit potential if you do your homework, put the appropriate data in the device, and then utilize the device to its fullest. Now there are a ton of other features in here on how you can set up specific targets and switch to different target ranges and use the internal compass and all that. But a lot of that stuff I find starts to get in the way when I'm shooting matches. I like to forget about some of that stuff because you're changing stages so often. If you were a military or law enforcement shooter and you're in a position, specifically with the military side, you're in a position and you're setting up on-call targets, or you're setting up areas where targets are likely to appear, then you can use these devices to their fullest and actually get your range and get your azimuth to the target locked on. You can use that versus the azimuth that the wind is coming at and all that fun stuff. So there are a lot of features in here. But to get the full featured applied ballistics, you have to get the full variety of them. Now Kestrel does have a sportsman model coming out, which is slightly different. It's a little bit dumbed down over this model. but it still offers you a ton as a precision rifle shooter, and it comes in at a much lower price point. Hopefully we'll be able to get a hold of one of those at some point, and we'll tell you, compared to the fully loaded Kestrel model, how well that works out. Before we go, I did want to show you one extra little thing that we have on here. I can scroll down here below environment to range card, and I can click that, and instead of having to scroll back and forth and input my range to the target for each time, I get a table laid out here. And I've got it set up in 50-yard increments, so I can just scroll through here really quickly and see what my elevation to target and my 10-mile-an-hour wind is, or I can scroll back through here and tell it I want my 5-mile-an-hour wind, or even if I have a mile-per-hour lead set in here, it can tell me what my lead is to my target. But I usually keep it set on my wind 2, which is my 10-mile-an-hour wind, and very quickly I can scroll through here and I can come up with a ballistic solution. If I wanted to, I could go to 25-yard increments or 10-yard increments. It's just going to extend how many different lines that I have to go through to get to what I want. But I find 50 yards is adequate, especially with something like a 243 or a 260, and then I can guesstimate if I'm between those. So really nice option if you need to get some data written down really quickly. And that again is on your ballistic screen. You just go below environment to range card, and you're good to go. Well, that is about all we have on that for this Mail Call Mondays. I know I ran through some stuff really quickly. If anything is not clear, please go ahead and leave a comment down below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you like the episode, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot!